This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler.
And we are so thrilled that you could join us. This one is called Buried Bodies. This is about the people who know where all the bodies are buried because they help bury them. Good help is another way that most people think of good help. We think of them as people who know where all the bodies are buried. When you're making movies and TV show, it's never more true than that good help can sometimes be hard to find. A great personal assistant, a great assistant who can think along with you is what you look for.
And we were very fortunate because we found not a good assistant, but really the best assistant. I mean, you really want someone who not only covers you up and covers the issues that you may have messed up along the way, but also can add to and suggest and almost become a partner in the crime itself. And that's who Ed Tapia became.
Yeah. Before Ed joined, it's funny, as we were talking to Ed in the little pre-show that we do so we figure out what we're going to be talking about. Ed reminded us that he joined it after season 5. Well, yeah, much later into the process than either of us remembered.
I don't remember doing Tales without Ed.
Yeah, and nothing could be more really telling about how a person fits in than you can't imagine a history of it without them, even though there was one. We both had good assistants before then. I don't recall, otherwise we would have done something about it. But when suddenly Ed Tapia, when we crossed paths with Ed Tapia, it wasn't just an assistant; it was a member of the team.
Very much so.
Well, geez, let's quit blowing smoke up Ed's ass.
Yeah, let's get him in here so we can tear him apart.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Ed Tapia. Ed, welcome.
Thank
you. Before we get going, we should also point out that not only was Ed just the most amazing member of the team back in the day, in the subsequent years, Ed is now a very terrific producer in his own right. You were a producer on Everyone's All-American. Now you're on Everyone's All-American.
All-American Homecoming.
Homecoming, right.
Yeah.
And you're going into what season of that?
The Mothership is going to season 5, which I did for the first 3 years, and the spinoff is in it's 12th episodes of season 2, and we are the second-rated show on CW. So we're doing well. We're doing well.
So Ed is a very much a producer in his own right. We'll get to that. We've leapt to the end of the story. God, what is wrong with me? Oh.
I'm glad you finally agreed with me, Alan. I've been saying that about you for years.
Thank you. Good.
And I want to say, just to bring back to the very beginning, that I wouldn't have the career I had if not for you too. I mean, I genuinely, the stuff that you guys taught me and the stuff that I learned from the team around you, I think is what has allowed me to go on to, a little bit of success down the road. And from very
a little bit
beginnings.
Of success.
Yeah.
Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start.
Just before we get to that, Alan, I've got a question for you.
Go.
Ed, you can just yawn for a minute. So, has Ed sent you any royalty checks since we worked together on the stuff he's made? No, never mind. Let's go back.
No. All right. We've talked about how you came to us. We'll revisit that in a second. But where'd you come from, Ed? You're an Angelino, aren't you?
Yeah, I was actually I was born here in LA. I grew up in Highland Park. Well, actually, I was born at Queen of Angels Hospital, and right off the Hollywood freeway. Huh. And my mom sent me to New York when I was really young, like 6 months old. And I lived with my grandma in New York City. till I was about 5. I'd go back and forth. My mom would come out and visit. My grandma would bring me back to LA.
Mhm.
And around 6 years old, I came back to LA full time. My mom was finished with school. She was working. And
What was your mom studying?
she was studying fashion, and she ended up being a pattern maker
Hmm.
for a company called Robin Hill Sportswear in the mid '60s, early '70s. And it was funny because I didn't realize how poor we were until I was kind of a teenager. Because everybody in my neighborhood was kind of lower middle class, upper lower class, if that makes any sense.
Sure, sure, sure.
And, my mom and my grandma did a really good job of hiding the fact that we were eating chicken and rice pretty much every day. Just 'cause it was cooked differently. You get the whole chicken and you cut it up and use every piece of it, and rice and beans or potatoes. And everybody I knew was like that. So I remember going to when I was finally in high school, we went to some of these other schools and saw kids driving around BMWs. I was like, what is this world?
Hmm.
Because we didn't travel much, didn't have much, but everybody didn't have much, so it was normal.
Yeah.
And I went to see American Graffiti when I was 13 at the Highland Park Cinema, and came out of that movie saying, I want to do this for a living. Had no idea how, no idea what they did, what was going on. I was 13. I was in the 8th grade.
What was it about American Graffiti that seized your creative soul?
A world that I didn't know existed. The cars, the fashion, the cruising, the music.
Mhm.
I mean, in that part of the early '70s, the '50s were a big deal. We were having sock hops, in junior high school and high school, and it was a recreation of that. And a few years later, Grease came out, and American Graffiti just grabbed me for some reason. I was already a film geek. I was already watching movies that I really wasn't prepared or
Well,
shouldn't be watching.
well, okay.
I shouldn't have been watching them.
Let's take a pin in this then. What is all right? So you were already a film geek. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
What was the first movie that suddenly? All right. What's the first movie you remember seeing?
The first movie I remember seeing, I closed my eyes in the climactic moment. It was Bonnie and Clyde. My mom took me to the Highland Park Cinema. And
How old were you when you saw Bonnie and Clyde?
8. It was 1968, I think, or
Yikes.
69. I was either 8 or 9.
Yikes.
And
well, the
my
ending
mom,
is pretty
my
brutal.
mom used to drop my sister off at the Highland Park Cinema on Saturday mornings, and back then it'd be the double feature, and in between the double features there'd be raffles, and sometimes the vaudeville act. There'd be like a comedian or something.
Really?
And then there'd be a first movie, then there'd be like half an hour, then there'd be a second movie. My mom would drop us off at 11 and pick us up at 5, and we'd be there all day, out of her hair.
Wow.
And so I remember, and then I fell in love with movies, the kid movies, and then started sneaking in, to the older movies. And in my mid-teens, I would go to the Eagle Rock Plaza, where they had 4 cinemas, each of them showing 2 movies. I'd get there at 11 in the morning, buy a ticket for the 7 p.m. show, walk in, they would just tear my ticket, wouldn't even look at it, and I would just pick the 3 movies I would watch all day, ending up with the one I bought the ticket for at 7 p.m.
Wow. You were a bigger film geek than I ever was.
So I would, yeah, all day Saturday I was in the movies. I was either playing sports or watching movies, and so I was what The Conversation, The Sting, 3 Days of the Condor, all those great great period in the early '70s, leading up to The Godfather, and all those movies over and over and over again. I'd sometimes watch them. I'd go back, if there was a great movie. I mean, I can quote lines from 3 Days of the Condor to this day because I saw it so much back in the day.
Sure, sure.
All of those movies you mentioned were really, really good movies.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's comparable today. If a young kid were looking to be in the film business, going to movies every day, I wonder if he'd be able to find the quality of those kinds of movies today.
Well, not only that, but I remember reading recently that if The Godfather were made today, it'd be 12 episodes on Apple TV or Amazon.
Mm.
It wouldn't be a feature, because nowadays everything has been so stretched out that and it makes sense to a certain degree because you can tell the story in much more much deeper.
It would be better serialized,
right?
Because you could really, wow. I mean, really, in essence, that's what Coppola did. If you look at 1 and 2 as a grand story, 3 you have no use for, but but really it kind of anticipates serialization in a way
Right, right.
when they cut it up later and they began to think of them as a grand opus.
Right. And think of how many movies, in the 80s and 90s were a 2 hour theatrical release with a 4.5 hour director's cut,
Yeah.
sometimes, which were better, which were better,
Sure. Yes.
because they put in all the nuance and all the stuff you'd have to cut down to get it to 2.5 hours.
It's true. The audience was already there ahead of the content providers. The content consumers wanted bigger, longer, deeper storytelling. So it shouldn't have been shocking in any way, shape, or form when the Netflix showed up and said, "Hey, all you can eat whenever you want."
And then, from there, I decided I wanted to do this, but being a kid in Highland Park where, 60% are Latino and very much everything was Catholic driven. And it's like, the rule was find a work at the phone company, the gas company, the post office, good benefits, a place where you'll grow and have a pension.
Yeah.
I didn't want any of that. I wanted to make movies or TV. And as I got a little older, I realized I like television more than I like features. Just in terms of the production side of it. When I started learning, and I went to work at a flower shop when I was in junior college, and I was delivering flowers in a delivery van, and I loved the job because I couldn't afford a car, but they let me take the delivery van home every day. And the flower shop had 5 different drivers, and we were all given a route for the specific day. And once we finished the route, we can go home. Well, if you were on the West LA route, you invariably had to go to Sony. It was MGM back then, Culver Studios, 20th Century Fox. If you had the Hollywood run, you'd invariably have to go to Paramount, KTLA, the old KGTV, Raleigh Studios. If you had the Valley run, you were at Disney, you were at Warner Brothers. So I would sneak onto sets. I would make my delivery and then sneak onto a set and just watch. And, back then, the security wasn't that big. If you were on the lot, they didn't care where you went.
Yeah.
I remember walking onto the set of The Love Boat and watching for 45 minutes, and Charlie's Angels, and a lot of these great shows. I would just walk in, pretend I would go to craft service, pretend like I belonged there, and they would just let me do my thing.
This is such an important lesson to all you kids out there. But really and truly, it is. It's on some of us would refer to that as chutzpah.
Yeah.
It really is. It's such a vital component of how to break into this insane business.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is available today any longer. I mean, I used to do that on Broadway. I used to see the second act of a show, because when after the first act they break, everybody goes outside. I would be outside waiting. And when
I did the exact same thing, Gil. I did the exact same thing in New York. So
I used to see all the second acts, and people would say to me, "Well, how was the play?" And I'd say, "Well, I really can't tell you how the play was. I can tell you how the second act was." And occasionally I'd get caught. They would.
The best one were the 3-act plays were the best, because then you'd see the second and the third act.
Right. That's right. But I mean,
I think there are different ways to channel that audacity, but it's that audacity. It's the fact that you did that, Gil, and the fact that you did that, Ed. But this, it's outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's so funny how things work out, because I was also delivering to some of the biggest names in Hollywood. My first tip ever, working for the flower shop, delivering flowers, I had to deliver. Johnny Carson had standing order. His wife got 24 roses every Monday and every Friday. And my first tip was Johnny Carson basically handing me $50. And I was like, mind blown. Later Diane Carroll, gave me like $25, and like my first 2 tips were these iconic people, and I was going to seeing homes and residences that I couldn't even imagine. I mean, it might as well have been Mars. Seeing Johnny Carson's Malibu estate the first time, they invited me in to put it on a table, and I was walking around thinking, this guy must be the richest guy in the world. And you realize later there's people that have much more. It was just eye-opening in a very, very endearing way for somebody who loved the business. And I was also having to deliver to these people sometimes in their trailers. We'd get a delivery for Lawrence Hughes on Love Boat, and I'd go on the studio a lot. And I'd find a production, I'd say, "Oh yeah, just take it out to her in her trailer." That would never happen today. but they would just guide me to, and I would meet all these people, and I'd tell my mom, and she was like, "Oh my God, did you get a picture? Did you get a picture?" You know, long before cell phones and selfies, that was always her question.
Sure. What was your first gig in the biz?
Um, Again, ties back to the flower shop. Going on the various studio lots and television companies, they had job boards, the old job board, the bulletin board. And every lot I would go to the job board and I would look for anything that was entry level, literally anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my little fake resume that I had made up, and I'd send an application. You know, I remember applying for a they literally called it a gopher job for KHJ Channel 9.
Mm-hmm.
I applied at CBS, NBC, Disney, and ultimately I applied for a job at ABC Television in Prospect for a photo clerk in the photo department. I was 21 years old, and I got a call from an HR guy named Doug Rotatori, who I will love forever because he called me in and he had a very almost uptight voice. I mean, my Doug Rotatori is like, Ed, this is a Doug Rotatori from ABC personnel. We'd like to know if you'd like to come in for an interview. And I went, I went in and I met with Doug, and he was really nice. And I told him, I said, I don't have any experience. I like to think I'm pretty sharp. I can learn. And the job was basically cataloging and organizing all of the stills, black and white stills and color slides that came in from the network still photographers. And I must have done okay because they offered me a second interview to go meet with Hal Garb, who I recently reconnected with. He's in his 80s. He's still running. He was a marathoner back then.
Mm-hmm.
And Hal interviewed me, and I get a call from Doug. And again, that same voice, like, Ed, we'd like to offer you the position of photo clerk two at the starting rate of $317 a week with full benefits. Are you interested? Something in my brain made me say, you know what, I got to think about it. And I don't know what possessed me to say, I got to think about it, but I told him that. And I waited like 6 hours and then called him back, said, yeah, I think I'd like the job. And they gave me all the packages. They told me to come down to their the HR office on Prospect, even though the job was going to be in Century City.
Mm-hmm.
And I filled out all the paperwork, and they told me I'd start the following Monday. Well, they also told me that I had to wear a suit to work every day, and I didn't own a suit.
That kind of job.
So, and back then,
Well,
everybody at the corporation, at the corporate level, wore suits back then. You know, this is 1981. Everybody was in a suit and tie. And fortunately, my best friend, Mark Alvarado, his cousin owned a clothing store called Model Men's in Highland Park. And he goes, I'll hook you up with my cousin. Just go see him. So I went down there. He gave me 3 suits on layaway that I could mix and match. And so the 3 suits lasted me like a year and a half, just mixing and matching different shirts, one pair of, pants with a different jacket. And around 1984, the dress code finally eased up, and we could wear sweaters and we could wear, sports coats as opposed to suits. But it was, and when I got to ABC, it was crazy because I didn't realize that anybody that wanted stills from episodes they were in had to come to me. So suddenly I was getting calls from the assistants of Henry Winkler, Robert Wagner, Farrah Fawcett, Lee Majors,
right.
Robert Guillaume. They were all calling me, and sometimes it was them themselves. Hey,
You
we'd
were
like
strangely hooked in.
Yeah, they would call me and say, "Hey, I want to come in and see the stills from that episode we did 2 weeks ago." And so, we also had ABC Motion Pictures at the time, and we were doing Pritzi's Honor, and we were doing Silkwood. So, I'd have to deal with the managers or agents for, Meryl Streep and Kurt Russell, and it was just for a kid like me at 22, 23, having to go to these people's homes and do photo approvals with them. I remember I'm 23 years old. I'm going to Farrah Fawcett's office and sitting with her as she goes through stills.
Yeah.
All the while I'm thinking, I'm sitting with Farrah Fawcett. I'm sitting with Farrah Fawcett. I'm sitting with Farrah Fawcett.
It's funny. In our last episode, Gil and I talked about the first episode that we produced of Tales from the Crypt was The Trap that Michael J. Fox directed. And I'm not a star fucker.
Mhm.
I yes, meeting famous people is one thing, but working with them to me is much more. That's
Mhm.
much more appealing. And to suddenly my first real, all right, let's get to work after just doing story editor stuff was to go and sit with Michael J. Fox at his bungalow at the hotel at the end of the Sunset Strip to go over his directing notes for the episode he was going to direct, the first time he was ever directing. And strangely, I felt very verklempt about it. It was I walking in that room the first time. It was, yes, it was rather heady. I found myself pulling the camera back constantly, going, "You're having a meeting with Michael J. Fox. You're having a meeting with Michael J. Fox." Like Chicken Little running around the room. He couldn't see it. Thank goodness he could not see. The little Chicken Little in my head running around going, "It's like stupid. Shut up already." But
No, and what's one of the things though that I really loved about both you and Gil in that, going to your homes, I never saw those photos of you with an actor. You go into some people's homes and every photo in their home is them with somebody. And that's only there to impress everybody who shows up. That shit doesn't matter to me. I don't have any photos with any actors anywhere in my house because to me they're just coworkers for the most part.
the thing that cured me, that was wonderful, was that as the chicken was running around my head, Michael J. Fox and I got down to work. And suddenly Michael J. Fox stopped being a guy who was, light years beyond me in terms of the pecking order. He was a coworker on a project.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he needed my help.
Right.
And
Right.
and so suddenly this is the great equalizer.
Right.
We were all in this together, pulling the same cart toward the same destination. And damn, if that
Right.
doesn't just teach you everything you need to know, we're all in
Yeah.
this together.
That old saying, never meet your heroes. For the most part, I've been pretty fortunate because there's a lot of people that I've greatly respected that and enjoyed, and I got to know them later when I worked with them. And
Yeah.
the one that comes to mind is Timothy Hutton. When I was in Austin doing American Crime, the second season of American Crime, Timothy and I got to know each other pretty well because it turns out we're both basketball fans. So every free moment we were playing hoops together. And he and I, as the two old guys, would take on the young kids. And I remember him from, being a huge fan back from Ordinary People.
Oh,
That performance blew me away. It was, again, one of those movies that just made me say, I want to do a movie like that. And then getting to know Timothy and him being such a nice guy. I mean, no offense, Tim, I still don't have a picture of us together, and that's okay. But I have the memory of working together and seeing his process and respecting it and seeing how good he was. I've been really lucky with people I worked with.
I will say in retrospect, I wish I had taken a few more pictures, but that's only in retrospect. What are you going to tell a young dumb kid like me?
Right, right.
Yeah, working with the people that we've gotten to work with has been one of the spectacular graces of getting to do what we do to make a buck.
Right, right. And then after 5 years at ABC Television, I realized, after about 2 years, I started applying for a lot of jobs within the company, development jobs, production jobs, and I couldn't get any. For whatever reason, I couldn't. And my boss Hal finally said to me, he goes, Ed, sometimes, an expert is somebody from out of town. I said, what do you mean? He goes, people look at you a certain way here. You may have to leave to come back. And that's always stuck with me, that you see often very qualified people overlooked by their own companies, and yet they go off to another job and a company hires them back a year later at a much higher position for a lot more money because they went off to CBS and did something for a year. And even though they were there right under your nose, they're just overlooked for somebody. And I'll never forget Hal's comment: an expert is somebody from out of town. And it stuck with me. And so I quit. I quit with no job to go to. And that was probably the last time I had a normal job.
Huh.
In terms of, that was somewhat corporate, even though it was entertainment.
Yeah, yeah.
And started the world of freelance work. I went to work at Interscope shortly thereafter. I became their story editor. I got to see, basically all the submissions. I handled like 10 freelance readers. And after 2 years, it was the same thing. There was no place for me to go. It was a great company. I loved Robert Gord, Dave Madden, all of them. They were good people, and we were doing a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows. But there was no place for me to grow and no place to learn. So again, I went off and did freelance stuff, and I kept doing that until ultimately Victoria Burrows, the wonderful casting director that you all interviewed, called me and said, "Hey, the Tales from the Crypt guys are looking for an assistant. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Hell yes!"
That's funny. The timing was perfect.
I was temping at MGM for the VP of Legal Affairs. I was a temp. Remember temps? Do they still have temp agencies?
I work as a temp. I work as a word processor.
Yeah. So I was temping for I was an assistant to the VP of Legal Affairs at MGM when that French guy tried to take it over, and they were shrinking the company, and they were coming out of bankruptcy.
Oh, right.
It was during that time. It was like, it had to be like 93, 94. And we lost go.
No. All right. Well, we'll press on for the second.
Okay. And so I was miserable, but they actually paid pretty damn well.
Yeah.
At the time, minimum wage was like, I don't know, $6 an hour, and they were paying like 13. And because I was working for a VP, there was like $2 extra an hour. And I was temping, and I was hating it. I was just writing shitty legal memos all day long. And the woman I worked for was very nice, and she. Sorry.
But at least you were temping within the business. You were temping for MGM.
Yes. I only worked for temp agencies within the business, and I did several of those.
I did a lot of temping. When I got Tales from the Crypt, had been working for almost a year on a temp gig for Occidental Petroleum in their corporate communications department.
Oh boy!
And on the one hand, I had to put on a shirt and tie every day, which is so not me. It is. But we had a great relationship. I really liked it. First of all, hey, steady income. The communications people were at least the one creative department in the whole stinking joint.
Right.
It was a fascinating place to be because Armand Hammer is an interesting guy. They were just building the museum at that point. It was a really interesting time to be inside that company. But I was always a visitor,
right,
to their world. It was never a world that I was ever going to be. And I was, man, and we've told the story of how Tales came to Gil and I, but yeah, I went from temping at Oxy Pete for a year to Tales from the Crypt.
Wow. And so Victoria called me, and I've known Victoria at that point for probably 7-8 years. We played softball together in the Entertainment League, and I trusted her. And she said you guys were good guys, and so
terrible judge of character, that Victoria.
And I don't know what you guys remember about the very first meeting, but what I remember is that you guys could not stop joking. You guys were just riffing off of each other, and I was just like,
we were just assholes.
Are these two guys?
What a couple of schmucks.
No, not a couple of schmucks, but you guys were you could tell that there was you almost finished each other's sentences sometimes, but
it's
in
really
a jokey
annoying,
manner,
isn't it?
in a jokey manner. And you guys were at those offices. I forget what they were called, but it wasn't Sunset Gower, but it was down there, kind of in that area.
Yeah,
Antiquarius. Was it at the Antiquarius?
Wherever George Burns was. That's where I met.
Yeah, it was called the Hollywood Studios.
Hollywood Studio. Okay, and we had a good first meeting, and then you guys said, "Oh, we'll let you know." And I waited around for like 2 days. Then you called me and said, will you take this much money? And I think it was $500 a week. I'm like, absolutely, I'm there. When do you need me? Huh. And only later did Gil tell me that you guys only had like 3 weeks in the budget for me.
Hey, wing and a prayer.
Because you guys were in post-production at that point. Yeah. You didn't know what your next job was going to be, and you guys were pitching like crazy.
Yeah,
your agent, Alan Kassir, I was on the phone with him like 5 times a day because he was setting up meetings, and you guys were pitching all over town.
I
And
think
meanwhile, you had all these filmmakers coming in.
I think there was a little patch there where William Morris had us in development working with projects on projects with Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
I
so
remember Mr. Lee coming in the office.
right. So we met with Stan a bunch of times on a project that Stan brought to us. That Stan had a bunch of stuff in his head that he didn't have time to work on, but he was looking for creative partners. He was represented by William Morris, so were we. And so they stuck us all in a room together. And among the couple of things that Stan Lee had that he wanted to somehow develop if he could, but he didn't want to do it himself. He wanted other people to to do the heavy lifting for him. And that's where we came in. And he had it was not one of Stan's best ideas. Probably wasn't even one of his better ideas. And it probably wasn't even a very good idea. Actually, it was kind of pedestrian, hey, it was Stan Lee. And it was even before Stan Lee really became the legend, he was still Stan Lee. And it was great fun to work with him, to sit in a room and be creative, and that improv yes and
I also remember a lot of people were submitting stuff to you. I was reading a bunch of scripts for you, and most of them were terrible. Sorry.
Well, hey, that comes with the territory. I'm glad you had to read all those scripts and I didn't.
And I also remember initially how seriously you guys took the post-production. You guys were in the editing room quite a bit and fixing episodes and on season 5.
Well, as you know, one of the joys of television is that it's not director driven, it's writer producer driven.
Yeah. And
because it's writer producer driven, really there's not one genius who's driving the bus. And so there are so many other ways for other people to contribute to the final product.
I'm back, and all I heard was you talk.
Oh, it must be difficult weather up in Canada today. That is where Gil is living these days, and so I'll apologize here. Why Gil keeps going in and out? It's we're having technical issues with Gil, but Ed and I will press on.
About me?
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Yeah, every time I think I'm connected, I speak and then I realize it goes out.
All right.
Yes, I am in Canada and their internet sucks.
Well, I was making a point that when I first joined you guys, Gil, I was really impressed how seriously you guys took post-production, because to that point, I hadn't been involved much in post. And you guys were constantly talking about the music. You were talking about, is there, and this is when visual effects was just starting out. Is there some way we can tweak this in post? Can we add a little more blood with the colorist? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember there were some days where you guys would have, a meeting, a pitch meeting at 10 a.m. You'd have a call, with William Morris at noon, and then you'd be going off to the editing room, and Alan would be writing something, preparing a pitch that you guys had. So for me, it was awesome because it was all these new things that I was, getting to actually experience firsthand as opposed to just seeing it from the outside. It was my introduction to production. Because up to that point, I'd only done, some PA work on a couple of features after I left Interscope, and after I left ABC, I had done some freelance PA work and some, non-union additional second AD work, that sort of thing.
It's way more fun inside, isn't it?
Yeah, I've always thought so. I mean, seeing how it's made, it was. I always say that Tales from the Crypt was both my master's and my PhD. That's the way I look at it, because when you do a 5-day anthology show where you have different actors, different costumes, different sets every 5 days with no opportunity to stretch it out or make it longer, you have to figure it out. There's no throwing money at a problem, because
that was never a solution.
No. I mean, if we went over, we had to shorten something else to make it up, and it was eye-opening to see how many elements it took to make a good show. That's the part that still people to this day don't understand. When people ask me what I do, I say I get to spend $60 million of the studio's money in 5 months. That's what I have to do. How do you do that though? How do you do that? How do you do it efficiently without going to 61 or 62 or 63 million? Because that's not acceptable.
It's it's the high wire act. Part of the appeal is having a show that you're writing, a show that you're prepping, a show that you're shooting, a show that you're posting.
Yeah.
And it really is to have all these deadlines happening in essence at the same time. Either this is unacceptable to you, or this is what makes you hum. And this is, you have to be one of those people to whom, look, there are people who do features for whom this is unacceptable. This is madness. Fewer and fewer of those people, because there's no feature business anymore.
Right. And not most, I would say a lot of filmmakers are choosing to go into the streaming world because of what we talked about earlier. You can tell a story in 10 or 12 hours as opposed to 2.
It's so rich, the storytelling environment, and just, you can go so many different places, and you don't have to broadcast. You can much more narrow cast, and ideas. I think of shows like Shtizzle out of Israel, which I would never have watched a show like that.
Right. I just finished a show on Netflix, a French show called Lupin, that was just amazing, just so well done.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, what would Game of Thrones have been like if George Martin had written that in 1985 as opposed to today? It would have been a 3-hour feature, and the good stuff in the book would have been left out.
What's the South Korean show that went?
Oh, Squid Game. Squid Game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this really has internationalized entertainment in a way really so much quicker than, we had that single category at the Oscars every year where, best foreign film, the best handful of movies. This leaves that in its wake. There's such a wide appetite for so much of what we do all over the world, and so much desire here for what the rest of the world does.
Right. And what's funny is that we got when I had been working for you guys for like a month.
Yeah.
And you guys started talking about, that's when you told me, unless we sold something, we might have to do something else. And then I remember you guys were pitching like crazy. And then all of a sudden, I don't remember the exact timeline, but we got an order for another season of Tales and the 3 Tales from the Crypt feature movies at the same time. And then all that happened. And then we had to find new offices. And suddenly we were off and running. We're off and running on Demon Night, I think.
That's funny. It's, as Gil and I said in the introduction, our memory is like there was no history before you, dude. And yeah, I guess it does kind of feel like you arrived and suddenly the shit got deep.
Yeah. I mean, and then suddenly it was like, oh shit, we got all this work, let's go. And then I found the offices in Studio City. We moved into that old Victorian building, and we started prepping Demon Night. And it was like, we're going to be shooting a feature in 6 weeks.
That was such a cool building, the one in Studio City. Yeah, because and Joel held on to that for quite a while afterwards.
Jack took it over, I think.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean we're going to be doing a feature in 6 weeks? I mean, it was a 5.5 week prep. And Gil got FA on the phone and it started budgeting, and Stuart Burton was making all sorts of deals left and right. You got Greg Melton on board. You got
that's funny. I had forgotten that when we got the order from Universal, it wasn't a, hey boys, take your time.
No.
Go figure out a script that'll work for the franchise. Was not the marching order.
Yeah, and I remember Gil and FA and Greg and you immediately started searching for space, and we couldn't find stages, so we ended up at the Van Nuys Airport, and that was the
movie that we're talking about is Demon Night. Demon Night. There was the first thing that we were happening. There were a bunch of scripts we were talking about for a little while. floating up in the air was Quentin Tarantino's script from Dusk Till Dawn.
Right.
We had met with Quentin a bunch of times. Now, Quentin had sent that script to us to read.
Right.
And he was, at one point, he was kind of begging us, make my movie.
And Kurtzman was going to direct. Bob Kurtzman was going to direct it. He was attached as a director at that point. And the K&B boys were on board already for all the visual, the special effects makeup. They came with the script.
Why didn't we do it?
Oh, I've asked myself that many times.
I mean, we that could have been the first 4-second Tales from the Crypt feature film.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there being some pushback with Bob being the director, and he didn't want to let go of it because he's the one that actually controlled the rights at that point. K&B did, because they were a relationship with Quentin. And that's my recollection. I don't know how accurate it is, but I remember there being some pushback with him attached as director.
So there was a complication that made it.
Yeah, it's like a deal couldn't be made, and William Morris and Alan Kassirer at the time were really pushing it. But my recollection is that we couldn't make a deal because of Kurtzman's involvement. And it's funny because Bob ended up being a really good director, really good dude. I don't know. Gil, do you remember why From Dusk Till Dawn we didn't make? Oh, we lost him again.
So close so far.
Yeah.
So yes, in the end, we didn't do that. Now, in addition to Demon Knight, was there anything else that was a strong contender for the first Tales from the Crypt feature? Do you remember?
Oh, I remember there being one that I forgot the writer, but the writer that did that episode where the guys chop off their fingers, he had a script.
Was the guys? Was that Walter's episode?
It was one of Walter's episodes. It was the writer of that. He had a feature, and I forgot his name.
It was the one about the guys who were gambling. Yes,
exactly. In that episode, he had a script that had a similar scene to it in his movie. That's why I remember it. And that was the other pretty strong contender at the time.
And then I remember then Cy and Ethan's script was, everyone kind of fell in love with that.
Yeah.
Internally.
Because, I mean, I remember you and Gil and Joel having a conversation where Joel basically said, it's shootable. We can shoot this. We can shoot this fast. We can get this out.
It is important to point out that the as we were setting up our film franchise there at Tales from the Crypt, we were still chasing the clock. We were still looking for a shoot ready script rather than a script that really represented the franchise.
Yeah.
We were still, there was still from above, if I may be so bold, doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. Well, they saw it in their defense. I guess that they saw an opening. The timing is now. The Universal says do it now. If we had gone and tried to develop the idea, I'm sure we'd have developed it right into the ground. When I say us, I don't mean us. The development process between Joel's people and Dick's people and Bob's people, finding a consensus would have been virtually impossible going through the development process. And
right.
Politics. Oh, the politics.
Yeah. And what I remember too is that we had a rough 2 weeks putting everything together. And we had a really rough 2 weeks. Can you hear me, Gil?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Leading up to Demon Knight, we had a rough 2 weeks after all the deals were closed to close all the deals. Because I remember it was, closing Ernest's deal and then the casting process. But you guys said, screw it, we're moving forward. I remember once Gil, once you and FA and Greg Melton decided on, was it Greg?
Yeah, it was.
Oh no, Greg. The direct Ernest wanted another guy.
Yes, yes, not Christian. Was it Christian?
Yeah,
Wagner?
Christian Wagner, yeah.
Yeah. So once the three of you decided on the Van Nuys Airport, I mean, we were like building almost right away. I mean, the plans came out fast. And I remember at one point, Gil's like, we'll be shooting in 4 weeks. We're not pushing. We'll be shooting in 4 weeks. And I remember thinking, we haven't even seen a plan yet. And we started shooting 4 weeks later. I mean, FA put that whole tent, trailer city out there, and we got to shooting. And it was so, when I joke about, the stuff I learned, the things that you guys were able to get ahead of so that we actually start shooting. I mean, that's stuff that I still look at today. I mean, in terms of getting the production designer involved early, getting your PM involved early, making sure you have the right crew, making sure that the crew is somewhat cohesive. One of my frustrations is today is some showrunners who don't understand how important that morale is to actually executing the rest of the work.
Gotcha.
It doesn't take many people to screw up a production. If you have the wrong DP, the wrong production designer, the wrong first AD, it's really hard to work around them. And I joke that I'd rather have somebody with 90% of the skill and 100% of the attitude than the other way around, because that one person that is somewhat of a pain in the ass will end up undermining your entire production.
I think a lot of showrunners today don't realize how important that is. And I think they just feel like, well, I control the script and that's what's important. And the other people will have to just figure it out. As
Exactly.
I deem.
Exactly. 100%. And it's frustrating, because those of us that have been doing it a long time, especially now that there's so many younger showrunners, it's harder for some shows. I've been very fortunate that the showrunners I've worked for over the last 5 years are all very serious about not just doing good television, but doing good television while being fiscally responsible.
Yes.
John Ridley insisted that we come in on budget on American Crime. The guy had just come off of an Oscar. The studio would have been fine had he gone over budget, but for him, it was a matter of pride that he was going to not take advantage of the studio and do a great show. I mean, we got nominated for 10 Emmys our first season, and John insisted. And he would say to myself and the line producer, if we can't afford it, let me know and I'll rewrite it. I'll change it so that, it works.
This is the problem solving outside the box. If you do not have money, then you're going to have to find some alternative, as I said, outside the box. And you can't compromise the story while you're solving your time or money problem.
One of the things that I took away from the two of you that, again, I still use to this day, and sometimes it's frustrating because I can't get the showrunners to understand it, is that we control the script. If it's raining suddenly in a scene that's not tied into anything, we don't have to go to cover. We can just write a line that says, oh my God, I wasn't expecting rain. And you can play the scene in the rain. You don't have to, because it rains places.
Yeah.
On certain shows, it never rains, period, because they go to rain cover every time it rains. I would rather write a line that says, oh, geez, it was sunny when we went in. It's raining coming out now. I didn't expect that. And then just keep on with the work.
If it doesn't impact the overall story, hey man, we got to do this efficiently. Let's get the less important stuff in the can so that we can focus all of our time, energy, and money on the important scenes.
Yeah. And again, I remember Gil and FA would get together when a preliminary budget was too high, and they would just go to you and say, okay, here are the elements. It's not a warehouse. Now it's out in a field. Exact same scene, right. Exact same scene with no set dressing, with nothing else, but you still get the work. You still get the emotional beats. You still get the story points across.
And we would go through the script, and in essence, as we used to put it, rather than seeing this, you're seeing this.
Right.
And really, that's the significant difference. It's and if you have to, you see this, and you fake this.
Yeah.
And
you also give the audience the opportunity to make up this when you're shooting this. They fill in the rest of it on their own.
Of course they do. And the audience, so long as the story is compelling, they will forgive a multitude of production of the lack of the money, because you're filling it in 1,000 other ways.
And what impressed me most, we did Demon Knight, obviously, and you guys have talked about that. But once we got into that next season of Tales from the Crypt, when we set up in Chatsworth, the one thing that, again, that I learned that I didn't know before that was how much time and energy goes into pre-planning before you actually start pre-production.
Yeah.
Now, when I think of the work that Gil and FA did in getting that space ready for us, I mean, it was a clothing factory, I think, when we found it. And, you know, it ended up being a great space. And it served our purposes very well. But again, it taught me that you don't have to go to a studio. You can the way you approach it doesn't have to be inside the box. And we were able to do it at the price we did because of all these other little elements. And it's difficult sometimes when you're working with studios who insist on you being on the lot or doing their thing, because I've always loved the warehouse model, just because it allowed us so much freedom to do what we needed to do. And on Tales especially, you know, after we did Demon Knight, and we had to do the season of Tales, I remember, the thing I remember most about that season was how many people, A, were happy that the show got another season, and how many calls we would get cold called on actors that want to do the show. You know, I mean, and the one that stands out the most for me was when Slash from Guns N' Roses, you know, you remember that? I mean, one of our grips comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Slash from Guns N' Roses, friend of mine, he wants to do the show." I'm like, "Get the fuck out of my office. Just get out of here," you know? And he goes, "No, I'm serious. I'm serious." I go, "Okay, then have him call me. Sure, whatever. Have him call me. If that's true, have him call me." 2 hours later, the phone rings. And, "Hey, man, this is Slash. My buddy Dave said I should call you." And
even it had to be a guy named Dave. It's just like
big fan of the show. Big fan of the show. I'd love to do
buddy
it.
Dave, man.
I hung up on him the first time. I thought they were fucking with me. He called me back. And he's like, "No, I'm telling the truth, blah, blah, blah." And I don't know if you remember, but, you know, I said, "Okay, then come on in today at 6 p.m. And I go into Gil's office and I said, "Hey, supposedly Slash from Guns N' Roses." And he showed up. He showed up with his girlfriend. And you guys didn't have a role for him. He said, "We'll make one up for him. You know, we'll write one for him." It was Vince Spano's episode.
Yeah. And we did. He was a competing DJ.
He worked 2 days. He showed up all 5. I don't know if you remember that. He showed up all 5 days to hang out.
Yeah, no, he just does love being there. He was, and not in any way imposing. He just loved being part of.
Yeah, he just wanted to hang out. You know, and I remember going to Gil's office and saying, "Guns N' Roses, the lead guitarist from Guns N' Roses wants to do our show." And Gil is like, "We'll write something for him then. We'll write something for him."
Again, it was just one of those remarkable things that happened on Tales from the Crypt, where we just kept getting to work with the most remarkable people.
And they would call us. I mean, that's the thing that I'm getting at. We would field calls from agents saying, "Hey, our client wants to do your show," or, you know.
You know, funny, for whatever reason, my prep music, as I was in the shower earlier, I was listening to Tommy. I really wanted to hear the underture of Tommy. It's really, really good. But, you know, we got a huge Who fan, and getting to work with Roger Daltrey, which was that was before your time, yes?
Yeah. Well, the post. I was in the editing room with you guys on that episode. Yeah.
Getting to work with Roger Daltrey was so exciting. I mean, my God, he was such a cool guy. Now, on the season that Roger Daltrey worked, my brother-in-law, Mark Norris, was on the show, craft services, but also special projects. We had a little money in the budget, so, you know, we would occasionally do food things for the crew. We would bump up a little special craft services thing, and Mark did that. And so Mark had a little station there at our studio in Santa Monica. And he would make tea every day. And when Roger Daltrey came into the set and he saw that the craft services guy was an English guy who had real proper English tea bags on that table, damn it, and made proper tea, well, every day that Roger Daltrey worked, he would go hang out at tea time with Mark Norris. And they would sit there and talk whatever. And funny thing, now, my wife is English consequently, and she would come to visit. Well, hey, Roger Daltrey, what would you not come visit the set of Roger Daltrey's there? So my wife strangely came to visit the set more often than usual, like Lucy Ricardo. So
I worked in Florida for 4 years. My wife came only one time, and that's when we had Chippendales dancers on the stage.
they're so obvious. They're so obvious. So my wife comes to visit the set, visiting her brother. And so as far as Roger Daltrey is concerned, this is his, the craft services guy's sister, who's, an attractive dancer, a ballet dancer. And so he begins to hit on her. And at one point, my wife thought, well, how can I not? And finally, my brother-in-law broke it to Roger that this was the producer's wife. You might not want to go here.
That's funny.
Quite yet, and yet
So he went directly to the source and hit on Alan and me. No.
And oh boy, I'm sure we let him down.
It's funny.
So yeah. Slash, yeah, we get to work with just the coolest people.
Do you guys remember during Demon Night why we had to shut down shooting one day early?
During Demon Night, all right, hold on. Okay, during Demon Night, one day we
ended up wrapping at 5:30, and we were supposed to wrap at 9 p.m. because something was happening.
No, what happened?
The OJ chase.
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was.
The crew was so into it. We literally couldn't keep working because people were just glued to the television in the makeup trailer.
Was that the reason?
Yeah. We ended up, because the crew was just the headspace was so screwed up that I remember Gil coming on to say, "Yeah, we'll just start over tomorrow." We were on schedule. We were a little ahead, and Gil was like, "No, we're just gonna keep going. We're just gonna cut it."
Completely forgot that.
Remember that, Gil? I mean, we had to.
I do remember that. I do remember. Were you with us when we closed down because and FA gave us a gun to take home? There were the riots coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
during the riots.
Yes,
during the riots.
And FA came into my office, closed the door, and he said, "We're closing early, and I'm telling you we're closing early. I'm not asking you. And also here, I want you to take this." And he pulls out I don't know what caliber, because I don't know much about guns.
It's a 45.
And I said, "Yeah, it was, yeah." And I said, "What do you mean take it? What am I supposed to do with it?" He goes, "Just keep it hidden on the seat of your car. Don't let anyone see it, because that in itself is an offense. If a cop sees it,
yeah,
they'll arrest you." And I go, I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to take a gun." He goes, No. If somebody attacks the car, you can protect yourself." And I go, "FA, what are you talking about?" And he said, "And then tonight at home, keep it next to the bed." I said,
it was a crazy couple of days. That was why it was chaos.
Yeah, it was bad.
I remember watching Reginald Denny getting beaten on the TV in my office at Crypt.
Yeah.
I have a vivid memory of standing there in shock watching. Wow.
Yeah.
Watching really chaos erupt in our city.
Commenting on something you said before. Commenting on something you said before I got disconnected once again about sometimes doing things on a studio costing more money. I had a situation where I needed keys, and I'm not sure what show it was on. It might have been with Tales, but we're getting keys for the studio, and I said to someone, get the keys made off the lot. And the studio heard about this and got crazy, and they said, no, keys have to be made on the lot. And I said, well, I can get a key made for $1.50, and you're charging me $5 a key.
Whoa! So
I'm getting them made off the lot. And they went crazy. And I said, I'm going to take the show off the lot. I'm going to go to a warehouse. I went nuts. And the resolution was they agreed to charge me $1.50 a key, as I could get off the lot. But I couldn't tell anyone that they were doing that, and I had to make sure I stayed on the lot. Same thing happened with Xeroxing.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was wild.
It's a gouge. It's a fucking gouge. It's ludicrous.
It's something they call soft money, and it's maddening because they'll take from one pocket to give to the other, and yet it goes against your budget and you can't control it. and
Right.
it's frustrating. It's very frustrating sometimes
Right.
because
And you'll have to take that out of your budget somewhere else.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the
Yeah.
the grip and electric prices are higher than they should be. It runs a whole gamut. You're forced to use their stuff. So it's a very different way of working. We couldn't have done Tales from the Crypt if had to be tied to a studio.
Oh,
We could not have done it.
No, we couldn't have.
No,
No.
not at all.
no way. No way. No way. Yeah, because your hands get tied in so many ways by all the feather bedding.
Yeah, exactly.
That you are
Exactly.
you're forced to eat.
The other thing I keep coming back to, especially that with both Demon Knight and that first season of Tales that I actually got to be with you guys from the beginning, is seeing how you guys put together the crew members, how you guys hired people that moved on, and how important it was for you guys to have them meet with other people to make sure that everybody gelled. I remember that being so important for you guys in terms of it wasn't just the resume, it wasn't how good they were. I remember Steve Milton moved on at some point, because he was getting big features, and you guys wanted to be their prop master. And I remember the process that you guys went through. It was new to me seeing, because I didn't know production all that well at that point still, and seeing how you guys went the extra level to make sure that they gelled with the production designer and with the set decorator, has stayed with me and made me look, maybe research people a little more, do the due diligence.
Yeah.
Like when I do due diligence now, I don't ask producers, I ask other crew members. Because the producers oftentimes don't know. I mean, if I need to know how good a first AD is, I'll ask the key grip or the gaffer, who are on set with him, all the time. And it's funny how so many really bad people keep working, and it's because people don't do their due diligence.
Yeah.
When we did that, I mean, we never thought of it as being unique or anything but kind of obvious to do it that way. And we never really, we never questioned it, and we would just look at each other and go, okay, let's ask the guy that might know more about the situation than we know. And, what do we know about going to another producer? What are his goals? What are his interests? We'd rather go to see somebody who's been on the floor with the guy, or has worked with him, or has been in the trenches.
This chemistry is so important. And yes, hey, there are people who are incredibly talented, magnificent skill sets. They're so impossible to work with.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it stayed with me, and it has guided me. And I think it's one of the reasons. I mean, I've been really fortunate with the crews I've gotten to put together. I mean, I've had to work in Texas, in Georgia, in Atlanta, in South Florida, in both Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And each of those times, I always go back to what you guys taught me in terms of just the cohesiveness and the camaraderie is just as important as the skill set. Because when you get in trouble, when you're in that 13th hour, you don't need people that are shitty to one another. You need people that are genuinely looking out for one another. And if you need to do a fast move that you need to get done in 15 minutes, you can't have, a grip that's going to say, you know what, that's an electrician's job. I'm not going to move that stand. As opposed to everybody hanging in, jumping in together like we used to do on Tales.
Gosh.
I remember moving sandbags. I remember, whatever it took,
when the meter's running and you got to get the shot in, then hey, there's.
I remember Lee Webb. I remember Lee Webb lifting tents. I remember the second AD taking cast chairs. Whatever it took. There was no sense of that's not my job. I'm not a part of it.
No, we're all in this together.
Yeah, and we had to teach the English crew that. If you remember, when we got to London, we had to teach them. It's like, no, but this is one unit. Everybody has to work together, and it's frustrating sometimes when I can't hire somebody that I know is great, where I have to take somebody that is going to be a problem. And eventually those people end up getting replaced, because one of the things I say all the time is you can't fool a crew. A crew knows when somebody is not pulling their weight, they get resentful, and it gets ugly really quickly.
It's a team. And everyone knows who's pulling in the same direction, and everyone knows who's not.
The other thing from that first season of Tales that I really was life-changing almost was seeing how good some of these technicians were. Seeing what Rick Boda could do with light, and seeing what Greg Melton could design in a week, and seeing how our set decorator could take this empty box, and one week it's a doctor's office, the next week it's the interior of someone's house, The week after that, it's a college classroom. I mean, just the sheer speed and talent of these people blew me away because I'd never been around it again.
One could take it for granted, the fact that this is how it always is supposed to be, how every show is. And look, this industry is filled with very, very, very talented people all over the place. It takes a special kind of crazy, in the best way possible, to pull off a successful anthology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's everything has to be outside the box, all the solutions. And as you pointed out in season one, that you said you found it's more interesting to work on a TV show than it is on a feature film. It's more creatively rewarding.
For me, it is. For me, other people maybe not.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate to get to assist Gil on the features Constantine and Starsky and Hutch, and Starsky and Hutch was a lot of fun. It was my first job back after a tragedy in my life, and it was fun. I mean, there was problems on it, but on Constantine, as I tried to help Gil as much as I could, but I was freaking bored because it was this big feature with a lot of visual effects. And it was, when Gil came on board, it was wildly over budget, and they wanted to start shooting in like 7 weeks. And Gil continually told them, "We'll be there, we'll get there." And I think we started like at 105 million. And by the time we started shooting, I think it was around 90 or 91. And some days were 3/8 of a page, and it was all visual effects. It was Keanu being pulled, on a string all day, and it was like, and the movie ended up great, but I was just bored. I was just bored working on it because once you set it up, it's just basically execution. And for Gil, it was hard. It was busy, because trying to keep track of costs, trying to stay on schedule. But Francis Lawrence was a good director. Philippe Rousselot was a great DP, and they were able to do it. But
where did you shoot?
It was here in LA. It was here in and around Los Angeles and the Warner Brothers lot. And they built some incredible sets. And that was the first time I saw that kind of money being spent. I remember Gil oversaw the building of a set on Warner Brothers' largest stage of the future hellscape, the future hell. And it was a freeway in hell with burnt out cars, and they augmented it with visual effects. But this entire massive set was built for like a 5-page scene, and that was it. That was it for the whole movie. And it was probably, I can't put words on it, but I'm guessing it was $1 million set. I'm just guessing. I don't remember, the budget, but it was for 5 shooting days. That was it. And I'd never seen that before. To think that one set cost double what, an episode of Tales cost was crazy to me.
That's just, since we have this moment, are you back with us, Gil?
I am.
Oh, good. Since we have this moment, as we're cobbling this show together because of technical difficulties, yes, this show will go out at this is a good moment to remind everyone that 2 weeks from yesterday, on December 17th. All right, if you're hearing this in before December 17th, on December 17th at noon Pacific time, we're going to be doing our table read for Charity for the Motion Picture Home.
Oh, nice.
Yes, we're going to read. We're doing a table read of Dead Easy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. An adaptation of Dead Easy. We've converted it into a radio play because God, no one wants to listen to a screenplay that wasn't finished for 2 hours, because we never got to finish that screenplay.
Right.
We were 3 weeks away from beginning principle when Universal pulled the plug and said, no, you're going to start this other movie in 3 weeks, as we all know.
Right.
So we're going to do a reading of Dead Easy, long rumored, finally found, and we've got a really good cast. Actually, the Crypt Keeper will be emceeing.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
The Crypt Keeper is emceeing, and John Kassir is also going to play the villain. You remember the Harlequin character?
I do. Very much.
John's going to play the Harlequin. We have Jake Busey so far.
Nice.
And I'm going to, of course, forget all the great people that we have. So, I'll just put my glasses on. We have Jake Busey. We have Brett Cullen. We have Lisa Zemeckis. and John. We're waiting for 2 other actors to respond. So we've got a really good cast so far.
I wonder if Brett would remember me. He and I played a lot of softball together in the 80s and early 90s. His nickname was Cowboy back in the day. I like Brett very much. I worked with him back when he did the Thornbirds in like 81 or 82.
Huh.
Small world.
Hey, teeny tiny. So we're going to be doing that in 2 weeks from yesterday. If you're listening to this after the 17th, you can always go to, of course, to our channel, to our YouTube channel, to our Patreon page, to our blog site, and there you can access the reading after the fact. Please make your donation first, honor system, to the Motion Picture Home, the MPTF. They really do need your money. They're going through great hardships, and God, what they do for film folk like us is fantastic. So
nice. Good job.
All right, I'll get down off my soapbox. Actually, Ed, we've had you for an hour and a half.
We've just started.
Hey, here's what we're going to do. Of course we're going to have you back because we've but scratched the surface and all the stuff that the 3 of us could talk about. The technical difficulties have been a challenge, but I think we've risen above them. I would love to talk about Crypt in London in greater detail. Let's do that on a subsequent episode that we all do.
Whenever.
And what we'll try to do is we'll try to pull in for a little while on that. We'll try to pull in Glenn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would have been great if we could have pulled off getting Glenn for this, because this was talking about what makes a great assistant.
Yeah.
And in the same way that, we found Ed, and Ed became more than just an assistant, an essential part of the team. When we went to England and did a season of Tales from the Crypt in England, we found an Ed. We found an English Ed named Glenn. And the story of Glenn is there's all kinds of fun stuff. It would be great if we could get Glenn. He's living in
Sweden
now.
He's in Sweden. Yeah.
And his life has taken some strange twists and turns.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I jokingly call him the closest person I know to Forrest Gump. Not in the fact that he's slow or anything like that, like Forrest was, but just his life experiences. I mean, Glenn, where are you? He'd be on a red carpet somewhere. Where are you? I'm in China. I'm in South Africa. I'm producing a movie. I'm directing a movie. I mean, it's amazing. For 10 years there, my first question to him when I'd reach him or text him is, "Where are you?" Yeah, because he's never in the same place for a long period of time.
Yeah. So that's what we will do next time. We will the 3 of us, and we will bring Glenn in. We'll arrange for that ahead of time. I promise you, audience, you will enjoy this. Glenn is fascinating, and he's a very creative guy in his own right. He's a filmmaker and a terrific writer, and just a delightfully unassuming presence.
Yeah.
I'm
still tight with his folks, and I was in London last year. I stayed with his mom and dad. Still, they wouldn't let me stay in a hotel.
A treat awaits you, everyone. We're going to end this one right here. We thank you all, as always, for spending time with us.
Maybe next time the Canadian Zoom might work.
Hey, we could all get lucky. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific Crypt content.